Wake up, Australia Utopia. Good morning, citizens, and welcome to Mad Mac Straight Talk. I'm Mad Mac. Thank you for joining us for the first of our hard questions today. Question number 1. Was the global financial crisis the great financial con? The answer is resoundingly yes. And for those who think it was an accident, please listen closely. It was a tectonic plate shift on a scale unprecedented since 1755. You may not know this, but in 1755, Lisbon disappeared in an earthquake, a tsunami, and raging fires. The capital of Portugal had been engaging in persecution of its citizens, and the Portuguese and Spanish Inquisition was the dizzying heights of corrupt control of the Roman Church. The GFC mirrored that corruption in a profound takeover of 250 banks globally. When you understand the banking system, firstly, you need to know that banking is, without question, the dumbest business on the planet, apart from, of course, insurance. It operates via a centralised control system which emanates out of Switzerland. It's called the Bank for International Settlements, a clandestine organisation run by the elitist wealth of the world. It was formed in 1930, 20 years after, of course, the Fed Reserve was formed in the US, which is also a clandestine control system. In Australia, we have something called the Reserve Bank. And the Reserve Bank is regulated by APRA, a Prudential Regulating Authority, and ASIC, the Australian Secretive Investment Commission. Now, because we're a relatively young colony, I mean, Captain Cook only came here in 1770 after all, and of course he would have been sponsored, shall we say, by the then elitist wealth, disposing of all those noisy Irish and other misbehaving people. We set out then to build the infrastructure that a country needs. In the last 50 years, we've had something that was called the aggregation of retail banking. It's where the big just got bigger, and you've got these 4 pillars. We've got Westpac, you've got NAB Your Money, you've got Crime Bank Australia, and of course you've got Anxiety. And they perform relatively simple financial services. In fact, there's probably about 6 or 7 revenue streams. You've got your debit card, you've got your credit card, you've got your car loan, you've got your housing loan, you've got your business loans, which of course are particularly hard to get. You've got your capital solutions, which has sort of been my specialty historically, and we'll get to my background in a minute. And then you've got a little thing called a promise to pay. So by way of background, I'm a lawyer by trade. I practiced in crime in the early days, 3 years of crime. Gosh, didn't want to have criminals as clients. That was doing my head in. I went off and I worked at a commercial firm, fell in love with commerce, fell in love with buying beachfront real estate because I'm a keen surfer. And then eventually I settled on something that I loved doing. I loved creating an income product for people that I called the beautiful oldies. They were retired. Now, if you've ever heard of a bloke named Peter Drucker, he's quite a smart chap. He's since passed away, but he's a management thinker. And he predicted that the future industries would be air purification, water purification, and products to finance survival in old age. When I read that, I went, yippee, I'm in God's waiting room. And so long as I unremittingly provide that income to those people, monthly in arrears, and on the other side, I used to charge the borrowers monthly in advance. So I ended up with a lovely little float. Now I did that as a law firm from 1985 to 1999. It was a significant year for lawyers because lawyers since Federation have enjoyed an exemption from what we'll called prospectus regulations, which is all the kerfuffle you need to raise the public's money. So in 1998, the Australian Secretive Investment Commission brought in this calamitous piece of legislation. It was called the Managed Investments Act. And it created something called a responsible entity, which of course was an oxymoron within 12 months. In 1999, ASIC banned 60,000 lawyers from engaging in money lending. Now they did that because in Queensland, I may have given away my location, because I am actually in a secret studio, because I don't want anyone to know where I am. Because if you dig into my history, which is why I haven't told you my name, you'll find that I was raided by 28 officers, including armed federal police. They stormed my home, and it was really quite cleverly orchestrated by my lawyer at the time, because I dismissed him for misconduct, and he's quite a clever chappy and a little bit sociopathic in terms of his need to create wealth. He facilitated the raid, and of course the beautiful oldies that I've been caring for 25 years, they got absolutely brutalised. They lost pretty much everything. And now, I've at long last perfected a model that I launched then. I set out to build a partner-led investment bank. Now, what's exciting about why it's taken so long is that now I really would love all of you to be partners in what we're doing. And I'll tell you why it has the potential to make an absolute bucket of money. So, have you heard of Goldman Sachs? Well, Goldman Sachs is a New York-based investment bank. It was birthed 150 years ago. Mr. Goldman and Mr. Sachs said, let's get together, let's create a partner-led investment bank. It is now, after that 150 years, the sixth largest bank in the United States of America. And it is an absolute dark force. There's only 480 partners. Now in Australia, you've probably heard of Macquarie Bank. Yeah, Mac Bank. I think it was birthed in around the mid-70s. And of course it's been a monopoly ever since in this sort of unusual world of investment banking. Because if you ask the average citizen, what's an investment bank? They'd probably put their hand up and say, surely it's a cross between a chartered accountant and a brain surgeon. You've got to be particularly smart. Well, actually that's not the case. You've actually just got to have a very good specialist skill in certain things, and then you add money to that. So the reason why the GFC occurred was so that the 250 banks that went bankrupt during that period could be, shall we say, hoovered up, controlled by the 1% of the world's population that control 50% of the wealth. Now, we're a long way from the epicenter of that control. However, we're in a little colony which is really quite overrun by corporate globalisation. I mean, financial services locked down by 4 companies. We've got the farmers getting oppressed by two shopping brands, which is your Coles and your Woolies. You've got energy that's not in many hands. You've got transport's not in many hands. You've got so many industries that are centrally controlled, and then sitting across them as a protective instruments, you've got the legal profession who respectfully, my colleagues, at a business level, some of them can't find their ass with a flashlight. I mean, they charge $600 an hour for shitting a cup of coffee and to ring their wife. Now, the reason why I'm talking to you in this candid fashion is that we've got a litigation finance business that we're intending to promote. But before we get into the detail of that, I want to call for questions. Anyone who's got questions about the GFC, anyone who's got questions about the control system that is banking, anyone in regional Australia, we're particularly interested in regional Australia, and I'll just explain why. The funds management industry, which was kind enough to allow me to make 150 million bucks from a standing start. My God, I made so much money, it was ridiculous, really. I was overpaid. I was making 15 million bucks a year net profit, that's after tax, with like less than 25 staff. So you've really got to say, why isn't that opportunity offered to more people? Well, it's as simple as this. Sydney and Melbourne are the big guys. They've then got Canberra. Now, Canberra's full of wonderful folk. We send love to the bureaucracy. We send love to our politicians. They make for hilarious watching because from a business perspective, I'd suggest you're a little bit prejudiced. Oh, excuse me, my colleague's phone's ringing. We're just short interruption, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, please excuse that rude interruption. We have turned our phones off. Now, the essence of my communication with you is that I'm now coming out of the wilderness. Gosh, I haven't earned a quid for a very long time, but I must say I have learned a lot. Now, I have written a book which I'd be delighted for you to read because my mission is to make you a lot more money than you are currently making. We're going to develop a little program called Simple Lessons to Your Black Belt in Money Making, and I define that as, what are you making today? Let's assume that's 100 grand. I'm certain I can move it to 200. Let's assume it's 150, I can move it to 300. Let's assume it's 250, I'll be surprised if I can't move it to 500. Now, we've all heard of Bart Cummings, legend horse trainer, now passed. He trained more Melbourne Cup winners than the majority, but what he needed to train those winners was very good quality horse flesh. However, I'm delighted to train a Grafton Stakes winner. I'll train anyone who is willing to understand that there is a very simple algorithm of wealth that underpins investment banking and has done for the last 250 years, and it just so happens that I unconsciously keyed in to that algorithm. What? I started without, well actually that's not true, I started with 25k, which I saved up assiduously as an article clerk. I was earning 110 bucks a week, I was living at home and I saved 100 bucks a week, but I toasted that 25k on my first property deal, but I ended up making 150 million bucks. So that's not bad, and to be honest, the first 100 is the hardest to make. Now, I'm extremely inexpensive because any money that you give me, I'm going to invest it immediately back into you, and I'm going to give you sovereigns. I opened with a question, was the GFC a con? Yes, it was. Let me explain why blockchain will rescue the planet from the 1% of the world's population who control 50% of the wealth. It's very simple. Satoshi, in my view, made an error. He said, I'm going to create a peer-to-peer cash transfer system without accessing SWIFT code or the banking system. So he moved a store of value from this person to this person using something called blockchain. Bitcoin's not a currency, it is an asset class. And the digital asset class has been out there for a long, long time. The banking system's been using it for a very long time. Where I think Satoshi made an error was that peer-to-peer cash transfer system is only the fingernail in the body of an investment bank. And if you want to operate as an investment banker, then you need to understand, well, firstly, you're not allowed to use that word. The word champagne is owned by the French. The word bank, banker, and banking is owned by the elitist wealth of the world, and you can only get to use the word if you put 50 million bucks with the Reserve Bank of Australia, which is a recipe for a very poor business model. However, we have a model called funds management. Now, just so you know, I do not give advice. In fact, I've been banned for life by the Australian Secret Investment Commission for giving advice. Now, the irony of that is that I never gave advice in my entire life. What I'm delighted to offer to you is not a statement of advice. It's a statement of fact. The fact is, you are going to die poor if you don't uncover the simple principles that create wealth. And that's what we're going to share with you on this show and in our business breakfast. Because look, I can't bear to watch breakfast TV. Why? Oh look, just it's not going to make me any money. So what we're going to do here in our studio, we've got a lovely kitchen right next door. We can cook up whole lots of yummy breakfasts, and in due course we're going to have some live audiences, and those audiences are going to be what we call smart business. That's small, mutual, and really talented. Because before we close today, my colleague is going to share with you the 7 virtues of mutualism, because I am no longer a capitalist. In fact, I think capitalism has failed irrevocably. I mean, Adam Smith, as you may know, is the godfather of modern economics. When he wrote The Wealth of Nations, which I think was in 1776, a year after the Great Lisbon catastrophe, he said that self-interest will drive the economy, but it must be balanced by good conscience. Now, when every corporate vehicle in the world commits first to shareholders, well, it hasn't got a conscience. Because when those companies, of the top 100 economic entities on the planet, gosh, 51 are companies, 49 are countries. So McDonald's is bigger than Latvia. And McDonald's doesn't sell food, it sells absence of hunger. It's a real estate business that combines with Disney to poison the kids. I think GE is bigger than Uzbekistan, and Morgan Stanley is bigger than New Zealand. So these big corporate vehicles that pledge firstly to shareholders, you need to understand a shareholder is not a stakeholder in our community. In the community that I've lived in for, well, gosh, since 1964, we are ruled by corporate global giants who are bleeding us. So what our plan is to do is to re-mutualise financial services. I don't think ASIC want that. I think they want the dominant control to remain in Sydney and Melbourne. There's $2 trillion down there in the funds management industry, and there's $3 trillion in the major banking system. So those 2 cities have $5 trillion. They didn't have a GFC. Mind you, they're paying for it now because their markets are full as a state school bus. And the only markets that are, in my view, viable are in regional Australia. And I'm telling you, you cannot poke a stick at those opportunities. So all we want to do is share with you where the very fertile soil is. We're going to share with you the techniques as to how to dig up the gold. And we would love you to be a member. As I said, it costs nothing to be a member. So we're going to come back to you with our next show in due course. Thank you for joining us.